Oh, it's on.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, February 6th. We have a very special birthday today. Chief Getzmiller, shall we sing? Yes. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mike. Happy birthday to you. Woo. Speech?
Wait a minute. Did you get that car waxing machine yet? I'm just curious.
You guys are lucky.
Okay. On with our agenda. Our first item for discussion this evening is the presentation by Area Ambulance Service. Chief Fagan?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this evening we have a presentation by Area Ambulance, who is our partner for the Emergency Medical Services Program here in Marion. And so I want to introduce two guests. We have Jennifer Peden and Keith Rippey, and Keith is going to be giving the presentation this afternoon.
Welcome.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. We want to kind of give you an update from last year, was when we presented last year. One quick aside, I think I'm a little older than Mr. Harper. We're at least in the same arena. Yes. So if I don't, well, thank you. I'm very IT challenged, so. So just to kind of refresh for any new council people that weren't here last year, Area Ambulance is the product of a 28E cooperation agreement signed by those 5 organizations back in September of 2005. Prior to that, Area Ambulance was owned and operated by Mercy Hospital. And that was from 1971, when there used to be a private ambulance service here prior to 71, and they left, and the city of Cedar Rapids asked Mercy Hospital if they'd take over the ambulance service, and they agreed. And from 71 until 2005, Mercy had it and operated it. Part of the challenge is that ambulance services are not core competencies of hospitals. And although the Sisters of Mercy are very merciful, they're also very astute businesswomen. And losing $500,000 a year on something that wasn't their core competency, Mr. Tinker, at the time the CEO of Mercy Hospital, assisted in putting this agreement together. And officially on January the 1st, 2006, we officially separated from Mercy and became a standalone separate service with members proportionately from each one of those organizations that sit on our board. Paul Wren is a charter member. He was originally one of our original board members and still on. And then your city manager, Ryan, is our other member. And for the most part, through the years, the city manager has always been on our board. So we formed a 501(c)(3) not-for-profit, and I also say we ain't for loss either. So And we are required as part of our mandate to be self-sustaining and receive no subsidy of any kind, no tax subsidy or any subsidy from any one of the 5 organizations. So I'm happy to say thus far over these 19 years, we have been self-sufficient and we have not required any subsidy. An operational overview. This is our service area. It incorporates 15 different communities. We've highlighted about 8 in that service area, but there are about 7 more that fall into that area out in the yellow portions. It's a total of about 260 square miles. In 2018, we had 21,000 calls for service, and you can see we're projecting for 2024, 27,136 calls for service in our entire service area. And to kind of put it in context, in 2006, we had about 12,500 calls for service when we started. So we've more than doubled over the course of that 18 plus years. Right now, we're averaging in January 81 calls for service per day, which translates into 61 transports. We have about 75% of our calls for service turn out to require transport. For Marion, we average 12 calls per day, and 9.5 of those translate into actual transports. Our response times, priority 11 is the code that we use for life-threatening emergencies in Marion. And our response time threshold is 9 minutes or less 90% of the time. Priority 12s are non-life-threatening emergencies in Marion. They still have red lights and siren, but they're not a life-threatening emergency, and our response time threshold is 12 minutes there. And before we go any further, I want to fall on my sword because we've not been providing the kind of service that we expect and we're accustomed to in our non-life-threatening emergency classification, our P12s. Part of what happened there was we had a significant, ever since COVID and the derecho, our call volume has fluctuated significantly, sometimes on a daily basis. It's not uncommon for us to have 100 calls for service one day and 40 calls for service the next. And that's a phenomenon that's occurred post-derecho and post-COVID. And I really can't speculate or don't have any idea why that is. Our call volume prior to that used to be very consistent. But anyway, what was going on was our call volume was declining July, August, September, October, November. And so in order for us to match demand with our assets, we took 1 truck out of our rotation. Well, as that occurred, it didn't affect adversely our response to 911 emergency, life-threatening emergencies, but it did affect our P12s, our non-life-threatening emergencies. So we were slow on the uptake in putting that unit back on the street. We should have put it back on the street sooner than we did, and that's the reason for the 70% response time in November, that we didn't make our threshold for the P12s 30% of the time. We added that truck back, and we also added back a what we call a basic life support unit. Their responsibility is outside of the 911 system, and they take non-emergency transports primarily interfacility between the hospitals, many of which go from St. Luke's or Mercy down to the university. So as we speak right now, we put up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're putting up 8 trucks. On the remaining days, we put up 7, which is what our demand analysis tells us where we need to be. Plus, we have the ability to take some of our office staff who are also paramedics and put them out in what we call a push truck. So we can put out a 9th and in some cases a 10th truck when we get a surge in call volume. Any questions about our response times at this point? They will improve, Mayor. They are improving, and I assure you they will continue to improve. how we operate is you'll see our ambulances on street corners, and it's dynamic system status deployment. And what do we use there? We use our CAD system. Has a rolling 5-year history. And what happens is that as each call comes through, the CAD system, based on that 5 years rolling history, tells the dispatcher where to place the remaining units throughout our service area to meet that 9-minute response time requirement. And so that's what you see up there. Those things that look like shards of glass, that says in that area, putting that ambulance where it's posted, it can make that 9-minute response time threshold in that particular area. So we use our street corner deployment. Nobody goes back to our main facility. When they go out in the morning, they're out and they don't come back until the end of their shift, and they spend their time posting and reposting as call volume comes in. And of course, we utilize a tiered response both in Cedar Rapids and Marion in terms of our first responders who are EMTs and paramedics, and those times when they're able to respond ahead of us and get there and render aid to the patient sooner. In the corner, what we have there every 20 weeks is we run a demand analysis. And what we look at is calls for service and transport, and how does our deployment, how many ambulances are we putting out, and how does our deployment stack up, and how many units and assets we're putting on the street, how does that stack up against the call volume and the transport volume. And so that's an example there, and we do that every 20 weeks, and we make adjustments to our staffing, our assets, and our deployment model every 20 weeks, depending on what the call volume tells us. Any questions about any of that?
Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, can you
Yes.
talk about you talked about your equipment already. You got 7 to 8 units. How is your staffing doing? Are you keeping up with the staffing? In other words, do you have times where you're short, or do you always have what you consider to be a full staff?
We fortunately, knock on wood, we have been very fortunate with our paramedic staff. We've had very little turnover with our paramedic staff over the last year or so. We've had a larger turnover with our EMTs. And right now we're putting through tomorrow 5 new EMTs on orientation. And one of the things that we did, we're the first ambulance service in the state of Iowa that's certified training academy in order to keep our pipeline going, because Kirkwood and the university cannot meet the needs of all the ambulance services around that require staffing. We are certified, and we've already put 2 classes through of our own EMTs to make them advanced EMTs. And we're going to be putting on an EMT class for ourselves here pretty soon. Right now, we're doing one for Urbana. And hopefully, the projection right now is March, April timeframe, we will become certified to train paramedics. So the goal being that we become far more self-sufficient. Right now where we sit, we're fine with our staffing, but we have had some real challenges over this last couple of years, particularly post-COVID. But our paramedics have never been in a bad spot, and our EMTs with these 5, we'll be close to full strength.
What is full strength? How many people?
Full strength would be, we have 26 paramedics, and we have, I think, 28 EMTs, and that's full-time lines. In addition to that, we have part-time folks, and we have an unlimited, I'll take anybody who wants to come in the door and work part-time, I'll take them. So, but those are full-time lines that fill a full-time schedule, but we have a lot of folks that, not as many as I'd like, but we have several folks who work part-time for us, and we'll take as many as those we can get. Other questions?
Go ahead.
Sticking with response times, just a couple of questions relating to that. Whether it's a P11 or P12 response, is there a basis by which you're setting your threshold of 9 minutes or 12 minutes?
No, that's a national standard, yes.
Okay, so it's a national standard basis for those responses.
Yes.
Okay, so that's certainly good for self-measurement. Then the other thing I was wondering about is, again, whether it be a priority 11 or a priority 12 call, what is the material difference between what your crews do in terms of the response to the patient, if I can say it that way? Is there any difference, or is it just a matter of who gets there first and the right protocols, the right modalities are being invoked?
Are you talking about the difference in our response, or the difference in the P11 and a P12?
Less about the difference between the two, just generally thinking about either response.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, Chief, this is maybe directed more at you. Are both entities, Marion Fire and Area Ambulance, responding to those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, since that's the case, is there a material difference between what Marion Fire is doing in their response for the patient
well,
versus what you're doing?
There, in the past, there might have been, in terms of our response time or our response approach, but we have, the chief established a work group of his folks and our folks, some of the police folks, and we're handling everything here in Marion as an emergency. So our response and our approach to each call is the same.
Okay, so there's equivalency of service and care being rendered irrespective of who's there first.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely
That's what I was trying to get to.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, thanks. That was important to me on just the response differential. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Also in regards to response times, when you to meet that metric, to meet that goal, does that clock start right when the request or call is received, or is it when a unit's available?
When our dispatcher picks up the phone, or it comes across on the computer. In the case of the Cedar Rapids, it comes across our computer. When we receive the call, the clock starts ticking. The minute we receive the call, not when we roll out the door or leave the parking lot or whatever. No, the minute, and we count, and here's a difference. We do not average. We count what's called fractile response time. So we count each individual incident separately, which means if we're at 9 minutes and a second, we're late. We do not differentiate, and we also do not average. And I'll give you an example. If you fall over here and I have a paramedic here, our response time is 0. If the next one is 30 minutes, that's an average response time of 15 minutes. That's deceptive. That one guy got horrible response and the other guy got a great response. We count each individual event separately. So if it's 9 minutes and a second, then we're late.
Do you happen to know the longest response time in the past 6 months in Marion?
Well, the longest one was one that's in the 19 years that I've been here, never happened before. And that was a situation during our call surge. We had 18 calls for service in an hour and a half. 17 of those required a transport. Normally that I've never seen it happen that way before, not in the 19 years I've been here. So there was a lady at one of your care centers who requested an ambulance who was suffering from dizziness, and 50 some minutes later, we had not responded yet. And the niece decided to take her aunt to the hospital on her own. That's never happened before in the time that I've been here. But that's the worst one, not just in the last month, but the worst one. And we don't intend to have that happen again. 6 of those 18 calls that were going on simultaneously in that hour and a half window were here in Marion. Wow. And there were chest pains, difficulty breathing, and as the tier of seriousness goes down, we have to prioritize where we go, and that was the situation there.
Sure, no, understandable.
And that's not an excuse, that's an explanation, and it's not acceptable in our for us.
No, I appreciate the transparency.
Ready?
Thank you.
Keith, first of all, thanks for everything for what area ambulance does for us. Can you just elaborate a little bit for the rest of the council and the staff? We used to house Adam 41 in our station. Can you tell us if that is still the case today? Also, do you still garage an ambulance here in town? Forgive me, is it up on 7th Street, 8th Street, 9th Street? Is
9th Street, yeah.
Still one garaged here?
Yeah.
Can you tell us if that stays here in the local community? Can you tell us kind of, does that rig go to Springville? Does it go to Walford, wherever the need is on that? Because we do understand and we realize that some of our call responses have gone up. What concerns me a little bit is the number of our care facilities here in town. And we do know that a number of our calls for service originate out of that 4 to 8 o'clock time window in the morning when people are starting to get up, and elderly is that's the number one time for heart attacks. We all understand that, but can you just share with us a little bit as to what that culture looks like, where these rigs are housed, and as far as the one that was here in town, we all see them sitting around in gas stations and convenience stores kind of waiting for that next call to come in, but can you just elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Sure. After Chief Egg arrived, we had several meetings, and it was mutually decided for a variety of reasons that housing that ambulance here was something that was not practical to continue. There were some compliance issues and a variety of different things that really brought us to that point, and we probably should have moved that ambulance some time ago. In terms of what we call post 3, which is where you speak of, that's one of our posts. Now that unit could go anywhere. It's here with the Marion priority. We also will post a second ambulance up here somewhere as well as a Marion priority, but they could go anywhere depending on whatever the next call occurs, which brings me to this point. We've been working collaboratively with, with Mercy Hospital and their ED. We are going to build a new facility adjacent to the Mercy Hospital ED, and we'll have a 2-bay ambulance post there. We're adding 2 more units to our fleet. The first one will be here in April. The next one will be here hopefully in November. And one of those ambulances will be assigned to handling non-emergent transfers out of both of these new EDs so that we're not taking anything out of our 911 plan. But we have talked about building a facility here back when Ryan first came here. So we've been talking about it for some time. And we have the opportunity with one of our other partners, Mercy Hospital. They have the property, they have the space, and fortunately, knock on wood, we have the funds to be able to build this facility. So that should take care of any issues that we've been incurring.
One more, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, one more, Keith. So by the end of the year, the city of Marion will have 2 new emergency rooms open. So when you're doing transports, are you going to be taking individuals to those emergency rooms, or will you be taking them to the hospital, or how are you going to determine where the transport is to?
Normally how they'll go in is probably through a 911 call in one of our 911 units. If they need to go downtown for a higher level of care, then the unit we've assigned for those transfers will take that person. So the unit transferring out of these EDs will be outside of our 911 system. So we're not detracting from our 911 response. But typically what happens is I'm at home and I need an ambulance, so I call for an ambulance, and an ambulance in our 911 system goes to their house, and we take them to the Mercy ED, for example. Then Mercy ED says, we're not able to give them all the attention that they need. Then we would utilize our other ambulance that's assigned to the EDs to take that person on downtown. And that 911 ambulance is still back in the 911 plan.
Okay, all right, that sounded a little confusing to me as to, so you could have two ambulances initially responding to a situation?
Patient choice gets to, if we respond 911.
Yeah,
If we respond to a 911, it's patient choice. So wherever that patient wants to go, if they want to go to your standalone ED here in Marion or go to the main campus, that'll be a patient choice.
okay,
If the patient is unable to make a choice and verbalize that, we go to the closest, most appropriate. So depending on the injuries and what's going on and what that facility can provide, that will be the decision maker. Does that answer a little better?
that's a little better.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
So
Sorry.
essentially, it's a separate fleet dedicated for non-emergent transfers.
Yes, it's separate.
If they need to be put into a bed for further care, they're going to be transported with a different rig.
And let's say, for example, that unit is not engaged in a transport, then it will post right here in Mercy's, in our facility on Mercy's parking space. Yeah. Other questions? So we have every expectation that will address the ever growing expansion of Marion and put us in a better location for our responses as well. You know, years ago, where we have our post now was fine, but not now. You've grown in a completely different direction and we need to keep up with that. So we have this opportunity. Mercy's been gracious enough to agree to that, so we're going to take advantage of it.
Good. Anyone else? Okay.
All right. Just quickly, starting back in 2021, our transport volume started falling short of paying our expenses. Prior to 2021, our transport volume always covered our expenses with a little bit more. With the ever increasing costs of post-COVID, in particular, prices have gone up. I was just told by our manufacturing representative today, when I ordered 2 more ambulances, that the price has gone up in the last year $80,000. So that $95,000 ambulance in 2005 is now going to be $465,000. So the expenses, and in our world, we cannot raise our prices. We're governed by Medicare, Medicaid, and we're in the Wellmark network, which they set the price. So our expenses go up, but our prices can't go up because that's just the way that the way that the government has it and the way Wellmark has us in that network, we're not able to do that. So how we continue to be profitable is we have 2 very good contracts with Lynn County for medical examiner transports, and also we staff the sobering unit at their mental health access center. In addition to that, we have a very good stream of revenue from our special events, things that we do at we charge for things at the, I don't know what we call it now, the U.S. Health Center. Maybe I'm going back too far, but we have so funding from non-transports is what makes the difference and continues to give us a little bit of room and a little bit of profit. So to give you kind of an idea, our unit hour cost is $161.39. And what a unit hour is, a total rolled up cost of all of our costs to put a paramedic and an EMT and an ambulance on a street corner. It's $161.39 an hour. And it typically takes in town about an hour to run a transport for our ambulance to be back on the street, ready to take the next call. It takes about an hour. We staff 132 unit hours a day on an average. So that's a daily cost of about $21,000. Our budget calls for 55.5 transports per day at $375 net. So we're short in the course of a year about $80,000 from transport revenue paying all of our expenses. So the the ancillary revenue from contracts and so forth help make up the difference so that we continue to stay a little bit profitable. We already talked a little bit about our community partnering in terms of us being a certified training academy, that we're going to partner with Mercy for a post up here, a facility. And we are currently teaching a class, an EMT class for Urbana first responders. That just started over the last couple of weeks. And then some of the initiatives that we've started with Chief Fagan and his group. We have a work group that has already addressed several different areas, operational issues. We have significantly improved communication between our crews and the fire crews here. And we talked about how to adjust our refusal when not everybody wants an ambulance, and we've revised our refusal protocols. And so we're working very closely with Chief Fagan and his work group. We also, at Chief Fagan's suggestion, met with the EMA, Emergency Management Agency, today, and we're embarking on establishing a region-wide EMS task force that will identify assets and protocols and procedures for when we have a major disaster, when we have a surge, when we have a multiple injury mass casualty incident. And so we will be we started on that discussion with them today. And we expect that we'll be having a meeting with several different EMA directors here in the next month or so to begin to put that together, because really, in spite of the disasters that we've had, we've never really had a collective regional task force where I don't know what Lisbon Mount Vernon can supply me, for example. They don't know what I can supply them if we had an incident, and that goes all the way out to the other agencies. So that, I think, will be a substantial step in improving a response to those kinds of incidents. And as I say, that came at Chief Fagan's suggestion, and we hooked onto that, and we've started that initiative today. And with that, I thank you. And I'm probably taking up more time than I'm supposed to.
Go ahead, Randy.
Keith, two-part question here.
Yes.
Real quick, and I apologize for the late question here. How many, do you remember, or can you recall, how many non-emergent transfers do you take out of the 911 area, such as like transfers to University of Iowa Hospital and Rochester? And the second part of that question is are any of those rigs out of the 911 fleet?
I'd have to go back and look to see how many of those transports that we do, but generally speaking, they're not taken out of the 911 contingent. I'm not saying that's not always the case, but generally speaking, we refrain from taking out of, detracting from the 911. But in terms of how many of those go to those different places, I'd have to go back and take a look.
That's fine. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know that some of these transfers are being requested, and I know that you're part of that network, and I know there's other services as well too, but by the same token too, we do know that there's going to be some transfers that need to go to some of those other, facilities, and I know you're participating in that. And I was just kind of curious because as well, we're all looking for those revenue streams to obviously backfill those losses, and I know that's got to be a working component within your model. So I was just kind of curious, but thank you.
The transfers are typically profitable. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Right.
Yep.
Especially if we go to Mayo Clinic or something like that, for sure.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Appreciate it very much.
Next item is a presentation on the Marion Historic Preservation Commission. We have Dave. Hello, Mr. Hockett.
How are we doing today? All right, this will be part of an annual report I have to do every year for the Certified Local Government Status, our CLG. Going forward, we'll be presenting this likely in January, next going forward. So the CLG is essentially a partnership between the local governments, county, state, federal government, to access funding and resources to help preserve historic character and fabric of communities. We have been a CLG since our founding in 2000 or 1999, 2000, when we established as a commission. We are a 5-member board. We meet at 7:30 on the second Tuesday of every month, bright and early for those early risers. We are, like I said, a 5-member board. We've had a vacancy for a while now, but that will be filled on Thursday with Bethany Jordan, who is going to benefit us quite a bit. She's a professional architect as well as a resident of one of the historic districts, so we're kind of checking 2 boxes that the CLG likes to see as well. Again, a little overview of our HBC. We do have 3 historic districts highlighted on the map there, and any projects that occur within those areas are reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. So this past year, we saw the caboose, the depot. We provided recommendations on those. Some of the facade changes that we saw in the old Masonic Lodge. A couple of the buildings that have seen some remodeling as late on 8th Avenue. We'd also deal with demolition requests. We have one coming up here on Thursday with the Bell Tower Lofts project, but we review everything from old historic homes, old historic garages, to even modern garages. What was built 50 years ago is now at least considered historic. It may not be, I'm sorry, it's old by definition of what is historic, but it may not be historic. So we review even garages that might have been built in the last 50, 60 years to make sure their status has not changed from just a garage to something historic. We have assisted in the nomination of 6 of the 9 National Register properties, including one of our own city properties with the McGowan House that was recently sold. We also assisted Judy Hall in writing of 6 local history books that have been made available to local schools, local libraries, as well as some of the local museums, including the State Historical Society in Des Moines. We've made those books available, and they're great reference, not just genealogical history, but also structure, architectural history in the community. And then what I do on as often as I'm asked, I do provide guidance and some best practices for homeowners or contractors that are looking to remodel a home. What are the best practices? The federal government puts out a list of what to do, what not to do. So I work with homeowners to try to at least get them the information. Unfortunately, the best practices are the more expensive practices. But I have presented it to them and have worked through options and steered them toward usually state grants for when they are available, although they're highly competitive. I don't know if anybody's been awarded one of those grants locally, at least. We have a 2-year goals and objectives cycle for the Historic Preservation Commission. We adopted it in 2023, or it might have been the very tail end of 2022. We do this for 2 years. I put some of the bigger items on there, but the complete list, it's a 1-page list, is provided in the packet. Some of those were assisting the wayfinding system that's being developed, specifically guiding people to some of our historic resources along the trail and into our historic neighborhoods. We've also talked at length, but not quite executed how to do it yet, is develop a local historic district designation. We have a lot of great historic properties that are really architectural gems, but they don't quite meet that threshold for a National Register nomination. So we'd like to find ways to recognize those properties and identify those properties in the community, not just in our historic districts, but throughout the entire community that do hold some local historical value. We'd like to continue to try to develop historic district tours. We've lost a few of our members that used to host those for the school kids, for Marion and Linmar. They're no longer able to do those tours. So we're trying to figure out a way to re-engage somebody to help us out with that, or at least put out some really easy to follow digital print or print media so people can take some self-guided tours where they're either visiting Marion or for the school districts to use when they spend, unfortunately, about a minute doing local history in the school districts now. We're also going to re-engage in the community events. We were pretty heavily involved with the Swamp Fox Festival, but as that went away and then we had the COVID years, we haven't really brought ourselves back into that public involvement yet, but historically we've been involved in a couple of events every year. And the other big one is identify a 4th potential National Register district. we have a couple potential candidates, but we're just not sure if they are going to measure up to the standards of the historic district's requirements. But we'd like to identify and look at those, and then might be a future project, future financial ask of the city council to conduct a fourth district if we can identify one in the next year or two. Again, we do meet at 7:30 every morning, or I'm sorry, every morning, 7:30. Wow. 7:30, second Tuesday of every month. And the public is, of course, invited to attend those. Questions?
Questions? Who's the chair?
Nick Dussel.
And so have we ever, you said, talked about CLG funding, have we ever utilized?
Yeah, we've utilized it 5 or 6 times over the past 20 years, 24 years. We've utilized it to do the survey and evaluations, which is like the kind of the homework of before you nominate a district. Then we've actually used it to nominate districts. We actually used it to nominate the McGowan House. We've got some scholarships to send.
Where does the money come from?
Money ultimately comes from the state.
State.
Via the federal dollars. And then Marion might have a small financial commitment, but usually we can count time or volunteer time toward our financial match. It usually consists of myself and usually 1 or 2 really passionate citizens or members. But sometimes we have to fill that gap. We'd have to ask for that financial assistance.
And is the committee involved in the annual report, or is that something you do?
It's something I prepare, then I present to them before I send it out. It's due at the end of the month, so they'll be getting the almost near complete draft next Tuesday morning.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the one piece that I'm really interested in, because I think it's a great example is the involvement in community events. I would really like to see that from a lot more boards and commissions regularly, because I think that's part of that engagement aspect that I think people don't realize, that there are opportunities to get involved all the time. But if they go to a community event and they're like, oh, I talked with people on this commission and that seemed really interesting, maybe that's something I could do in the future myself. I think that's really important. But my question, wondering what were some of those ideas for future involvement in community events since we don't have the festival, or is that still like in planning?
That's something we've talked about several times in the last couple of meetings. We haven't met in a little bit to discuss that part of it, but we'd like to get involved in the fall. The name of the event now, the fall event. We have informational booths. We have done the city showcase in the past. We didn't do this past cycle. So we just got to find those events, whether it be farmers market, those are held frequently. I think we have more opportunities now than we did, but Swamp Fox is always kind of celebrating the history of Marion. So it was always a great event to attend. And that's usually where we've got our most attention or traffic.
Sure. Thanks.
Good. Were the committee members unable to come tonight, or?
Unfortunately, no. I had to get this scheduled fast because I have to have this annual report due.
Okay.
Going forward, I'll have the chairperson at least here every year to help present. This is that one-off year, so
that's fine. Our hope in scheduling these was that
we have I think every council meeting going forward there'll be a board or commission here, and next year we'll have Nick here to give a little update as well.
Thanks. Dave,
Mayor, I was just going to add on to that. As council knows, we've got now a calendar of presentations, boards and commissions, and external partners, and that is one of the things that we want to make sure we're doing, is that it's you're getting to interact with the boards and commission members that you appoint. So moving forward, as we start rolling that out, that will be the expectation.
Anyone else?
Thanks,
Dave. Okay, next up is Leanne and Rita. Purchasing card policy.
Thank you. I'm here today to give you an update on where we're at with the P-card program and to seek your feedback on the purchasing card policy. So currently we're working with JP Morgan to customize the P-card software, and soon we will be piloting with one department. Following City Council's approval of the P-card policy, we will be providing training to cardholders, and then they will sign a cardholder agreement before obtaining their cards. Once we process some transactions, finance will do a monthly reconciliation. So this screen shows you the single transaction maximum and the billing cycle maximum. These are aligned with the purchasing limits in our regular purchasing policy. We're asking for the finance director to have the ability to override a purchasing limit temporarily. So that would be used in cases where, let's say somebody needs to make a purchase and they are at their their billing cycle maximum, and the purchase is a one-time purchase, and it wouldn't make sense to set up a vendor for a one-time purchase. We might temporarily increase their limit. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
Just out of curious, Rita, how many P cards will be out there? I mean, how many people are gonna have a P card in their possession?
So initially the rollout is for three people. But then when we roll it out across all departments, I'm not really sure at this time. Currently, our credit card holders, I think we have 41. Okay. So I don't really know. It'll be up to the directors.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted again to share with the rest of the council. I'm super excited about this particular module. I sat on this through that committee process, and I think this is going to be. It was very enlightening as far as the education to me. I didn't know the total scope of what the P card brought to the city as far as being able to manage that, channeling it, and being able to monitor it off of a dashboard. Those were all components that we've seen on this. So I'm excited to see this roll out. Again, thanks for all the work into it. And I think it's going to allow us to kind of track some of these purchases and monitor and guide the direction on some of this stuff that we have not had in the past. So I just wanted to say thank you again, and looking forward to seeing the results of it. So thanks.
Anyone else?
Rita, I just wanted to just briefly comment. I appreciate what you've done with this policy document. And you've put some control limits specified in there, in addition to not only the expenditure thresholds that you've already stated, but also some other provisos relative to what the P cards can or cannot be used for. So I just appreciate the work that's gone in on this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else?
Just want to let you know that the future council action will be for the approval of the purchasing card policy. We will ask for that at the February 22nd meeting, and the changes would be effective March 1st.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Exciting. Thank you. You don't get a P card. Okay. Next, we have Chief Kitzmiller. Birthday boy? UTVs. Yes, sir.
UTVs. I'm going to sit here. I'm old. I only got one slide, so I'm going to milk this for all it's worth. But this is your 6-month UTV update. We didn't have any tickets written for equipment or anything like that. We did have 2 incidents, both of them involving stolen UTVs. One of them, a young man took it from his dad's work. We caught him in Thomas Park, and he was cited for curfew and driving in the park. Then we had 2 kids that had absconded from 4 Oaks in Cedar Rapids, made their way to Mount Vernon, stole a UTV in Mount Vernon, then drove it back into Marion. We had a short pursuit with them down by Menards. We broke it off, and eventually they went over the hill behind the Stonegate Apartments, not realizing how far down that ravine went, and then ran on foot, and we got them a little bit later. And so we charged them with reckless driving. Mount Vernon had them for the stolen UTV, and then there were some other traffic charges by Cedar Rapids and a couple other agencies that had brief chases with them. But other than that, we've had no issues. I'm open to suggestions if you want to see changes, but I think the ordinance is working as written right now, unless you guys think differently.
Anyone have any input on that? I mean, for whatever it's worth, twice I've seen, I think, people driving something that didn't qualify. One in North Marion and one on 8th Avenue. Tried to chase them, but I couldn't find them. But other than that, that's it. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Chief, so you want to move from a 6-month review cycle to annual at this point?
That's up to you. We haven't had really anything since it passed, and that's kind of up to.
That is entirely up to council. I mean, and if we do go the year, I think we've shared that if we do see a trend, we will make sure that we bring something forward if we are seeing a trend on something. But as Chief noted, since this has been enacted, we've had a total of 4.
Yep.
So we'd be supportive of a year review.
Well, Steve just commented upon my inquiry, maybe let's see how this summer performs, and then make a judgment, this fall.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just very happy that this is like pretty low level stuff that's come up.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, I think at least the concerns I had really haven't materialized, I mean, the things I was worried about that might happen. So anyway. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Okay, our agenda review is next. There are no items marked on the first 2 pages for discussion. Are there any items that council members want to discuss? First item that's marked is on the 3rd page, which is E1. Mike Barcolo.
Yes, I just wanted to give you a quick update. We have the amendment to the Central Plaza project. So this has our guaranteed maximum price, or GMP, as we call it, of almost 8.4 million. And they have a substantial completion date of December 24th of 24. There are some long lead items that we need for the ice loop. And so we won't have the ice loop likely operational this winter. It'll wait till the following winters we talked about during budget. There is the amendment in the council packet, but I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Go ahead, Steve. Oh, Grant, go ahead and then Steve.
Okay. Mike, you mentioned long lead order for certain equipment on the ice loop. Is that like the refrigeration equipment and the like?
Yeah, the condensers and some of the actual equipment that works inside of what we will have as the addition to the depot.
So will the construction of the depot, that enclosure be delayed until that equipment is available?
No. So if you recall, a lot of those walls, so the south wall, west wall, and north wall are louvers.
Oh, okay.
So we can always leave those out. And the top is actually open. So
that's right. Yeah, but all the in-ground support piping and all of that will be done in cycle with the main construction.
Correct. Yep, and our contractor is well aware of the discussion that we're having, so if this is approved on Thursday, they know to start getting shop drawings put together on Friday so that we can get these things ordered as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Steve?
Mike, can you tell us about the contractual language in this? So I understand the guaranteed maximum price that even if the cost goes up, this cost is fixed and the city will not be charged any more money. But let's say there are some areas where there's certain percentages in every contract for allowances. If those are not used, is there any opportunity for this amount to go down because of those allowances not being needed?
Yeah, so in the amendment that's in the packet, I won't go line by line, but
that's
there's
fine.
Some stuff that's built in there. So there's some contingencies. For example, there's a 2.5% contingency that's in there. Similar to the library project or public service, you always kind of have those line items that you can kind of move stuff around, but we will be the gatekeepers of that. So we will help watch that stuff. So if we don't end up using that, yeah, we would not pay Rennerneck that amount. That amount would stay with us. But this is the guaranteed maximum price. So unless we actually make changes, so let's say for some reason we double the size of the ice loop for some reason, obviously that's an incurred cost. And so then the GMP would come back to city council as an amendment or a change order to change that, because we're actually changing the scope. So as long as we don't change the scope, that's our dollar.
And if I recall, there's still a couple of options quoted in this.
There are.
So when do we decide on, who's going to decide on how we're going to move ahead with those options?
So we'll kind of look through it. So we have a group with several departments.
Okay.
Just like we just had a meeting this week to talk about the coolant that's actually used as part of the refrigerant, because there's some new global warming requirements that are coming out. And do we want to change that now, not knowing what's going to happen in the future? So we're still navigating some of that stuff.
Okay.
But we have a group that's working together with all the departments, because this is a fairly large project.
It is indeed. Well, and the entire city's looking at this.
Yep.
So everybody's in anticipation of this getting completed. It'll be a great project. Thanks.
Anyone else? Great, go ahead.
Mike, back to the maximum price that we have here. What I'm understanding is that there are some, what I'm going to call management reserves to anticipate any escalations in material pricing and the like, or labor pricing, that give Renderneck some breathing room. But those management reserves being included don't exceed this maximum price. Is that right?
Included in that 6.4, we'll call it, number.
Okay. So in the event there is an unforeseen cost escalation that this project sees, is there any mechanism by which Renderneck would come back to us on a defined timeline to let us know that there is a cost exceedance that need to be addressed, whether it is by them or if they would ask for monies over this? And I guess what I'm just doing is I'm hearkening back to the library and not hearing for 6 months that there were some cost escalators that needed to be addressed. So give me a little bit of context just around what I'm trying to explain here.
Sure. So you got to remember, this is new legislation. So how we built the library was construction manager as advisor. With this project is construction manager at risk. So this is Renderneck's risk. So if there's escalations, it's on them.
Okay. So then that means they were probably pretty robust in setting their management reserves that make up the $8+ million.
And we were able to self-select contractors prior to make sure that they met certain requirements, so that it wasn't just low bid. So it was low bid, but they had to meet certain parameters. And so there weren't any contractors that we actually took out of the running. But that's something where if someone were to submit documents and say, we want to bid on this project, but they were not capable of doing it, where you could run into time management issues or product quality issues, we could automatically deselect them. But we didn't have any instances where we had to do that in this process.
So I decode that to say we should have no negative surprises with this project under this structure.
That is the hope.
Okay. All right, good. I like that.
This is new, so we're all learning. So.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Sarah.
But Mike, this is not about the budget changes, but curiosity, if the ice loop part of it is coming later, I'm picturing this all getting done. What does that section look like in the next year? Well, the ice loop part of it has to be finished. Does it look like the plaza only, or is it just an empty?
So
is it just
what I understand is the long lead items are all inside of the plaza. So we would set it up. It's just we may not set the whole thing up. And as we get closer to that December 24th deadline, we'll have to actually figure that out. So we're a little ways, 10 months out from deciding that, but we'll have to see how it looks. But yeah, so it could be it looks like the plaza during the summer, and we just don't set the stuff out for the ice, and we do it the following year. We'll have to figure that out as we get closer.
Okay. And do we have a target date for groundbreaking?
Amber is already working on it.
Oh, so okay, we'll find out. Okay. Yes. Okay. everybody's anticipating and excited about it. So the support in the community has been tremendous for this project, and we're going to be kicking off the public part of the capital campaigns. What's the date of that, Seth? 13th? 13th of February, so. Okay. The only other item that's marked is F1. Are there any items under E, under engineering, that need to be discussed?
I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
For the, it has to do with those temporary easements for Fifth Avenue. Is Fifth getting complete reconstruction? Yes. Underground and everything? Okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Okay, Kesha, F1.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Wanted to bring your attention an opportunity for additional funding for the Seymour Trail. Typically, the Seymour Trail Phase 5, what we're referring to, comes from up by Menards, which at the northeast corner of the screen, that big white square is the rooftop of Menards. The red line comes down underneath Highway 100, crosses Indian Creek into Folkswoods Park, crosses Indian Creek onto private property, and then crosses Indian Creek again to connect to existing portions of Seymour Trail that have been done, I think, the last couple years. So what we had previous construction estimates at 1.9. Recent estimates have gone up significantly, although we have not added too many construction items to this that would make it go up. So with the revised construction estimate, we were looking at a large funding shortfall. However, the MPO has reopened their application period for trails funding, specifically for trails. They didn't have all of their funding allocation requested or applications brought in, and so they reopened that. And so it's staff recommendation to apply for an additional $1,035,000 to bring our local share back up to 80% of the project, of the expected construction cost.
Okay, and what are you looking for from here?
On Thursday, there will be a resolution submitting application for additional funding.
Does anyone object to applying for additional funding?
Pretty easy, but it's a big chunk of money, so I figured we'd bring it to your attention.
This is another highly anticipated project. So when do we foresee that being completed? We
would expect letting this fall and then construction next year.
Okay. Awesome.
So, and the rarity of this funding opportunity right now, and then there are also expected to be FY25 funds. Typically with MPO dollars, they're $28 or $29, and so it is kind of a unicorn series of events that have allowed us to apply for these funds and to keep it within the construction schedule.
So. Okay. Thanks, Kesha. Appreciate all your work. All right. As I said, there are no other items marked for discussion by staff on the agenda. Is there anything in particular anyone wants to discuss or have questions on? Okay, that brings us to the end of our work session and the closed session.
Mayor, I move to adjourn to a closed session regarding real estate transactions as permitted under sections 21.51J of the Code of Iowa.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding real estate transactions as permitted under the Code of Iowa. May we have the legal counsel statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51J.
Thank you. Any discussion before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Miskman?
Yes.
Mayor Abawasley?
Yes.
Ms. Menser?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Sterned?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We're adjourned to closed session. If you didn't grab a treat for the chief's birthday, go ahead and grab one.
What's that? No.